There you go. Can we just go over a little bit and just everybody shift? There you go. Perfect. Okay, everyone, please, straight ahead. Here we go. Hold on. Here's you, okay?
Yep.
There you go. Perfect. Here we go. Good. And just a moment.
Kids with dreams and no sense of reality and survived, and we're here. Those are the kind of moments in a life that you just don't get over.
So without any further ado, enjoy the show.
Thank you.
I always get a little nervous when you have to show a film here because in many ways it's like bringing something home to the family.
Yeah, it's shot in Toronto, but you're trying to make it look like New York. I said, yeah, that's great. You know, that's not bad. Because the city's like an actor.
Premiering a movie that took me 20 years to make in front of 2,000 people makes me want to cry.
I mean, there was a time that I can remember when people said, well, film will die. It hasn't and it won't, and it's great.
It's now my pleasure to welcome the 6 directors from the City to City program and our moderator and CEO and director of TIFF, Pierce Handling.
Thanks, Leah. Welcome, everyone, to today's press conference, City to City press conference. My name is Pierce Handling, Director and CEO of TIFF. I'd like to start out just by introducing the panelists, and then I'll sort of lead off with a question and maybe just sort of frame this year's program. To my immediate left is George Mponsa, the Director of the Hard Stop. Next to him is Michael Caton-Jones, Urban Hymn, who's been at the festival many times before. Next to Michael is Elaine Constantine from Northern Soul. Welcome, Elaine. David Farr, The Ones Below. Again, I think first time in the Toronto Festival. Tom Geen's Couple in a Hole, also first time. And at the extreme far left, Paul Katis, Kilo 2 Bravo. Welcome, the City to City London directors. Thank you so much for coming. Now, one of the reasons we started this program a few years ago was to put a focus on, as opposed to national cinemas, on a city. And we thought it was just a different way of actually looking at cinema in an interesting kind of way. And of course, when we started the program, we on purpose went to cities that weren't obvious cities like Los Angeles, New York, Paris, London, et cetera, et cetera. So here we are about 5-6 years into the program looking at London. And I guess the first question is, of course, like, why London? And I think the reason we started this program was not just to look at look at cinema in a slightly different way, through a different kind of prism. It was also to look at a city that was perhaps undergoing some kind of transformation, some kind of disruption, some kind of creative moment. And we thought that we had arrived at this with all of the other cities we chose. And of course, now we have come to London, which is a huge filmmaking tradition. But I think these filmmakers, almost all of whom are first-time filmmakers, if Michael is one of the veterans here, but the rest are basically first-time filmmakers. This was the intent, because we felt that there was some kind of spark, creative or otherwise, some kind of disruption. 2 of the films deal with the North London riots. I'm not sure if you've seen them. But I guess my first question to all of the panelists, and just ask them, doesn't really matter the order of which, is, do you feel at this point in time that there's something very special going on in London that either unites you or doesn't unite you? Is it there a real moment of creativity, creative spark, or are there certain subjects that are maybe perhaps new subjects that you are very keen as filmmakers to tackle? Who wants to start with this kind of? Do you want to go, Paul?
I'll
you look eager.
Yeah, I mean, but London is a very vibrant city anyway, and I think one of the great things about London is the fact that you have a feeling that you can sort of do anything, and young people sort of have that feeling. So I've always felt that there's a general undercurrent of creativity in the city, and the opportunities to do things are actually not bad in London either at the moment. There are some funding organisations, but plus with technology getting cheaper and cheaper and easier, there are more people just getting out there and doing it themselves. And it doesn't matter whether you're shooting it on an iPhone or you're shooting it on a DSLR or something like that. So I think you're right, Piers. I mean, I think there is a little crackle of something exciting and different cultural groups coming out with material as well. So yeah, I'd say that's a good roundup, London.
Terrific. Anyone else want to?
I think what's strong about London is just its diversity. At the moment, it's a big place. There's a lot of people coming from Europe and the rest of the world, and just the diversity of opinions and cultures there is kind of vibrant. It's very. It feels as though you can actually mix the cultures up quite easily, and that's acceptable. Whereas before, it might not have been the case. That's it.
David, go ahead.
Yeah, I suppose it's just only to develop that a bit that. Maybe when I was growing up, I used to think that British cinema was a little bit of a separate creature. It was just as a viewer to Europe, for example, would be an obvious one. And we had very strong social realist tradition, which was fantastic. But it felt a little bit like that was it, plus the odd weird iconoclast, like a Peter Greenaway or someone like that. And now it feels like it's like in my film, the two women leads, one of them is Finnish and the other one's French. They're both living in London, and no one finds that weird. Mm-hmm. It's nice to be able to sort of embrace Europe, embrace the multicultural differences in London in many different ways, and to feel we're part of a European tradition. That's a great relief, I think.
My experience has been as a photographer. Who moved from Manchester to London in the mid-90s, and there was something very unique going on, not just in London but in the UK generally, with the editorial world. And I worked for the Face magazine and ID magazine, which were culturally, sort of street culture at least, and creatively a country mile ahead of any other magazine in the world, because they were kind of speaking to the youth and speaking to artists and speaking to musicians who were on the other side of the tracks, who were kind of coming up from grassroots levels. And I just think that my experience through coming to London and working for those magazines set me up as an independent filmmaker, really. Yeah.
Terrific. Tom?
Well, I'm the only non-British filmmaker in the group, because I'm Belgian. I came to London, not here. London 20 years ago, and I mean, London has been like sort of an amazing, welcoming city where you can just do what you could sort of come there and be who you are. And it's a bit like Ken Livingstone said after the 2005 bombings in London, that basically it's like a city where everybody just can come and be themselves in a way, and it's totally true. And you sort of totally basically developed whatever I wanted to do, I could do it. And so that's one really important point. And I think at the moment what's happening in London is some scary stuff happening, I think, because of the whole property prices and the gap between rich and poor is getting so amazingly wide that I guess that must have created some creative force. I think there's a lot of things fighting with each other, I think, and I think it creates a lot of stuff. It destroys a lot of stuff, but it's creating a lot of stuff because lots of people are leaving London. But I guess there's lots of artistic communities starting to form in places that before were unknown and not even on the map, really, creatively, now become like these real forces. And I think that is a real interesting thing that's happening. And yeah.
Thank you. George.
I was born in London, and so in some ways, London is kind of all I know, and it's, for what I consider my home. The film that we premiered here yesterday, The Hard Stop, is about London. It's about North London, and it's a departure from the previous two feature-length documentaries that I've made, which have been about subjects, in Africa or the African diaspora. One was about Congolese fashion victims, I suppose. And then the other one was about a boxing village in Ghana. And the reason why I wanted to make this film was I wanted to do something closer to home, so, about something that I felt I knew, and something that sort of spoke to my identity, because essentially I'm British, And so, I embarked on this journey, and I started making this film. But it's interesting what, some of the other directors have said, because London is, I sort of quickly realised when I started making that, actually, here's a part of London that I don't know. And, here's another world that was actually on my doorstep and has always been there. And, I'm talking about Broadwater Farm Estate in North London, and, where Mark Duggan, the man who lost his life and whose death sparked the UK riots, came from. And so it's been quite an interesting experience for me.
So lots of threads to be picked up here, actually. So why don't I turn it over to you guys? And I'm not sure the format here. Is there a microphone that gets passed around? Yeah, so just raise your hand, and if you could just identify yourself in terms of which media you come from and who you are directing the question towards, or just the general panel, that would be terrific. And I can keep things going. Anyone got a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, hi, I'm Emma, BBC News. Hello, guys. It's a question actually probably more to George. I don't know if I really agree with this statement. One of you said earlier that London was a place that you can do anything, really, that you can be anything. Isn't the whole point of your film, George, that you investigate a part of London where people indeed feel quite trapped and they haven't got prospects, and that's what led to the riots of 4 years ago? Thank you.
I mean, to some extent, that I agree with that, but for me, that is what makes the two main protagonists of my film, Marcus and Curtis, who were childhood friends of Mark Duggan, who, Marcus, when I started filming with him, was being charged with being the quote-unquote instigator of the UK riots. But what I feel makes them somewhat heroic by the end of my film, The Hard Stop, is that they're people who have got that capacity to change and to not take this prescribed route for them, and to I guess transgress that sort of the parameters of what they're supposed to be allowed to achieve, coming from where they come from, and this my greatest pleasure in coming to this festival is that Marcus and Curtis have come over as well, and they were at the film premiere yesterday, and wearing caps that they had made specially with The Hard Stop printed on them. I managed to persuade them not to wear the Hawaiian shirts that they bought earlier. They've been doing a lot of shopping since they've been here, but. I think they're a great example and a role model that, look, you don't have to be trapped. And just because you come from somewhere like Broadwater Farm, you don't have to take this prescribed route. You don't have to end up being a victim of gang culture or a victim of, unnecessary use of lethal force by the police.
Michael, do you want to add to that? Because basically he's just summarized your film as well.
Yeah, I can't remember the question now. I was busy listening to the answer.
It was sort of more, it was, you feel free, as filmmakers, you talked about that, but of course it's about people focusing on film, on characters who feel somewhat trapped in their environment.
Well, I think that's, all drama is conflict to a greater extent, so you're trying to find big conflict or small conflict. I think it's not any different. London's no different from any other place. But I think if you look at the six of us here and all the different films, I don't think there's any one defining London film. I think it's absolutely that there are so many different things that are just slivers or facets of daily life there. I don't know that. I think to a greater extent, well, does the pig make the sty or the sty make the pig? Whether someone can get out of something is as much down to their personality as their surroundings. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Any next question? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi there, Henry Barnes here from The Guardian. I live in Brixton, which has just undergone a huge amount of gentrification, and a result of that is that we have lots of film crews now shooting there. I believe part of London Fields, which we just watched, is shot in Brixton. Is it the responsibility of filmmakers such as yourself to introduce us to areas of the city that international audiences haven't seen? And what do you think the ramifications of that is, or are?
Go ahead, David.
Well, only that I live in Brixton too, and there's a sort of double edge to Henry's question, unquestionably, because this relates to something that Tom was saying. I think I'm a slightly different answer, to be honest, because but in terms of, I think what we are at is a real crux moment for the city, because it's undeniable that over the last 20 years there's been this unbelievable creative explosion in the city. I've lived there all that time. It's just completely unrecognisable in feel, and there's lots that is positive about that. I think we should celebrate that in terms of the different cultural possibilities and who's come and what you can do. But I feel, right now, the city is at a sort of breaking point in many ways. There was the huge social issues that led to the riots. There's a massive issue, as Tom was saying, around land. And there, like all cities where art explodes, what happens is that money follows very, very fast. It's happened all over Europe, really. And in some areas of London now, for those that don't know it, what used to be real proper artist areas are no longer the preserved. You can't live there. It's impossible. And Brixton even will become a bit like that, which used to be, an area of the previous riots in the early 80s. So the cities at some point have to make big choices about their identity and what they want. And there's no question that in the next 5 years, the city is going to have to answer those questions. And at the moment, it's answering them in the wrong way. And there is the beginning of a squeeze out of the kind of talent that has exactly created the thing that apparently the city wants in the first place. And that's going to be an issue.
Anyone else want to add to that, or should we just go to next question? You look thoughtful, Elaine. Okay. Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Genevieve Hassan, BBC News. Do you feel there's a bit of a pressure when making a London film or a film set in London that it's either got to be a gritty London drama or a film about posh people to sell to a broader international market for them to essentially get it, to identify with either those two extremes, which is what seems to mainly happen? And also for the filmmakers can kind of talk a little bit about what they found the benefits of having this city-to-city programme shine a spotlight on your films during the festival.
Who wants to tee off on that one?
Well, my film is set in a forest in a hole in France. So it's nothing to do. I guess what I'm dealing with is not at all what you said. It's sort of in the middle. I have got an obsession with middle classness in a way, and because I am middle class, and that's what I know best. So that's what I want to talk about, basically. And so I'd like to see more films like that. I want to see more films about the gentrified people, really, and really go into uncompromising stories about them, uncomfortable stories about the middle classes, which you really rarely see in the UK. They're kind of the ignored classes in a way, because it's a lot of middle class people making a lot of films about working class or gangs or drug dealers, or council estates. It feels it's going always in those kind of brackets in a way. And I like what's happening with people like Andrew Haig or Joanna, what's her name? Joanna Hogg, who's really introducing a much more middle-class sensibility to the whole voice. And I think in London there has to be, there's so many ignored stories in that respect, do you know what I mean, of whatever goes on in the middle-class mind. You just have to look at continental Europe, what's going on there. There's such a rich tradition, especially in France, of middle-class dramas, and they are fantastic. And that's where I'm really want to be investing in, basically. So, although it wasn't set in London, it was set in a hole in France, but it was sort of coming back to the same, it's how middle class deal with certain traumas or whatever, in the way they deal with it, from their values and from their perspectives in a way. So that's what I'd like to see more in London, yeah.
And David, your film is absolutely middle class.
Yeah, Tom's just described my film, and my film is set in London, so I win on that. But it is, it is. Yeah,
it's not the whole.
But I even object to this word middle class because it's funny when Tom said that, my British sense of me got a bit angry with Tom, which is the sense of that he sort of said, oh, you can't make, it's not fair on you, but this class thing is insane, but it's still there. That the reason that one gets the shackles rise slightly is this notion that what you've just said is that all it is that middle class people do films about working class people, and then suddenly you go, well, hold on a second, there's loads of working class people doing films about, but it's a kind of madness that's still in our culture around class, and it drives me mad. The films that really drive me mad are the posh films made by posh people about posh people. Because they most of them in about 1930, and there's always a king, and they're the ones that create the problem, and then we all shuffle around underneath this dreadful, awful thing, and that's the bit you need to blow up.
Elaine,
I've got a slightly different opinion on this. I think that a unique story should be told, and it doesn't matter what class someone's from or where they're from, and I just think there's a bit of a sort of poor attitude towards arts funding in the UK, and we are sort of playing poor relative to the US market. So everything that we produce, or everything that's backed, or everything that's legitimate, has to be appealing to American audience because of our language.
Really? This is a pretty impressive.
Not everything, but
sure,
I've been in so many meetings where people say you can't do a film about the North and have these people going, bloody hell, because the Americans won't understand them.
You've got to subtitle it, exactly.
Yeah. So for me, it starts from the kind of idea about funding and how we embrace a British sensibility over and above, what's coming out of London and what's good about London, because I don't think that London is a place that really embraces people like me who want to do a unique story. I think a lot of my experience in working with or trying to get funds or any kind of open door was all about trying to make it a homogenized product.
I think, Elaine, you're right, but you're sort of talking about a commercial imperative as well.
Yeah.
Which is, and it's not just about the cliches, if you like, that we know sell, and so consequently finances will be happy to back your film. It's got those cliches in, but it's also about the genre choice. Yeah. I think there's a large slice of the British film industry that's making sort of mini-me's of Hollywood movies and adopting the same sort of genre structures that they would have, but on half the budget or even considerably less than the budget. But there's a marketplace for that, and it seems to work, and because it seems to work, the finance is there to finance it. So there are still red bus movies, aren't there, basically, going around, even, 40 years after they were first popular. So there's an international cultural view of what London is that is financeable, I suppose would be the way I put it. And I think that's why you end up in that slightly vicious circle.
Yeah. I just think because of the English, we're speaking English language, everybody says, oh, well, we have to sell our films in America, whereas people who are in France or, on the continent don't have that problem. Yeah.
I think it's very difficult to separate class from the dialogue in Britain. I think the middle classes have had quite enough say in my life, to be honest. Filmmaking is essentially a bourgeois sport back there. I think you get patted on the head. The most loathsome kind of film is this heritage Britain. It's basically shilling for tourists to get people to come and visit the place, and it's a kind of cultural dead hand that really is just a dead end. It's horrible, and if you want to work, you've got to do that kind of crap sometimes, and it's kind of painful, and it really, you just have to kind of bruise your way through if you want to do something difficult. It really is taking the hard road. And it's almost been ghettoized, like the country. You can make an expensive picture with a red mane or a cumberback, or you can go down the estates and have some hoodies, and you get no money. And that's basically your choice. And it's a horrible, horrible reflection of our culture, because there's a gazillion different stories. He's quite right that there should be films about the middle class, but unfortunately the middle class have this cultural chokehold on what we get to make. you know? Everything has to get, if you want to make a film, it's got to be one of them two. Or it's, you know, if I sound bitter, it's because I am. You know, I made this picture, Urban Hymn, and it was set in Twickenham and Richmond, which is not an area that people know too well from outside Britain. But it lives kind of cheek by jowl, rich people and poor people. They live side by side, and that's my experience of London more. Sure, there's some poor ghettos, sure, there's some rich ghettos, but in general, they live side by side. And, you know, I don't see films that reflect that mix too often.
Thank you all. Did you want to add to that, George?
Or no, I just want to say that, you know, I'm definitely a middle-class person, you know, but I've been known to go undercover from time to time, you know. You know, in order to get access to some of, you know, people like Marcus and Curtis. But, you know, I find it very, very interesting what everyone's just said, and there is an obsession with class in Britain, and it's something that I've been aware of all my life. You can't not be when you're British, but, you know, meeting Marcus and Curtis and working with them, and, you know, them being a reflection of Mark Duggan, you know, it taught me something because, you know, you don't have to be defined by your, you know, position in society or what class you're supposed to belong to. I mean, actually, when I started getting to know Marcus and Curtis, there was a quote from Peter O'Toole that just started ringing in my head. And Peter O'Toole said, I don't come from the working class, I come from the criminal class. And that was just something that I just couldn't help thinking about in relation to Marcus and Curtis. But you know, they don't. For me, what inspired me and kept me motivated to make this film for 3 years is that they don't fall into a stereotype. You know, you start with something that you think you know, and you know, you find out that actually it's not that. It's much more complicated than that, and people are much more complex than that. And I just think there's this tendency to want to just categorize people immediately. And I think that's where Britain has a bit of a problem with this class consciousness thing.
It's a bit depressing, but we're here at this panel doing City to City talking about class, guys. I think, you know, we should be over it. It shouldn't be an issue, and we're sort of making an issue by talking about it all the time. You know, I would look at it slightly differently. There's a sort of a commercial market for commercial films that have a known route to a certain market that people like, and you see that on TV as well. You know, talk about heritage drama. I mean, TV is just replete with it. And then there are films that most of the guys here are making that's a struggle to get the finance and all the rest, but we make them, and they get out there and they're seen in the marketplace, so they have their place. So it's not depressing at all. It's not, you know, it's not stultified. You can make a difference, and you can make the film that you want to make if you want to in London. That's one of the great things about the city, is that if you've got the energy and the drive to do it, you can make it happen.
Terrific. Next question. Is there a next question? Yeah, go ahead.
The filmmakers could say how they found this, having this city-to-city program has helped shine a spotlight on their films in a way that perhaps other festivals may not have done if this program didn't exist.
Who wants to tee off on that?
I found it great. I have to say, just simply, it's great. In my, I don't know about the rest, but in my particular case, we had not screened the film anywhere. This was its world premiere, and I was kind of nervous that a small film set in Richmond and Twickenham might not communicate itself. But what was fantastic on one level was that it was normal human beings who'd paid money to go and see it, but that it was that they got what the intent of the story, which was a universal story. And you know, the greatest thing you can hear is this could have taken place here. You know, the subject matter could have taken place in Toronto. And it, you know, it cuts through, I'm sorry to mention the class thing again, it cuts through all the preconceptions that people in Britain might have had, you know, and they might have come at it with expectations that are nothing to do with what you intended. And people here just took it as a film about human beings, and they related to it or didn't relate to it from there.
Anyone else want to? How much time do we have for this? I mean, it's a great discussion. Do you want to continue? Should I sort of probe here?
I mean, the one thing I'll support, actually, Michael,
that's
less to do with the city strand, more just to do with TIFF, and why it's such a great festival, I think, for filmmakers, is because largely the people that go and see your films aren't filmmakers. It's the general public, and that's what's so fantastic about this festival. As a first timer here, that's been a joy. Just going up the escalator in the light box and hearing people behind you, and it's only 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but the lady behind me was talking about having already seen 3 films that morning. It's I can't think of any other festival in the world that does that. So I very much compliment TIFF for that. It's been fantastic.
Thank you. So shall we wrap? Are we sort of finished now? No more questions from you? Thank you so much for coming, everyone. And go and see the films if you haven't seen them. It's an absolutely diverse, eclectic selection of films. We're very, very proud to put this program together. I want to thank everybody, Paul, Tom, David, Elaine, Michael, and George for coming to Toronto, attending the festival, and we look forward to seeing you. What's so great is there's so many first-time filmmakers on this platform, and we look forward to seeing their future work. So thank you so much for coming today. Thank you.